Hello, welcome back to part 4, the final part of your morbid bedtime story of this mystery manor. If you haven't watched part 2 and 3, you're not going to know what's going on. You should go and do that now, otherwise the spoilers are going to arrive fairly swiftly into this video if you continue watching. But last time we left this house, and we'll have a little recap here of what happened. Anna thinks the house is alive and has decor preferences. Callum says some other entity moves things in the house and gets angry, and Bernard thinks they're both cuckoo cray cray, especially his son. But interestingly, we're going to reintroduce the characters for this part, and you'll notice they're a little bit different now. This is Bernard today, and this is Callum. So a lot has changed since we left in the last part of the story, and as you can tell, some time has passed, and Anna is not with us anymore. And you might be expecting me to explain where she is, or more specifically, how she died. But I'm not going to do that yet, because all will be revealed by the end of this video. But the reason I'm not telling you is because Bernard, who we're mostly going to be following this act, himself doesn't know exactly what happened. He just knows that soon after his conversation with Callum at the end of the last video, he found his son and Anna in the pool below the house, and Anna was no longer breathing. With his limited information, as Callum refused to disclose what had happened, Bernard needed to act quickly with assumptions, which takes us back to the attic to what is going to become Callum's room, or prison, where our story has finally caught up to the present day appearance of this manor. So Callum's room here was once an old storage room before it became Callum's, and Bernard had planned to decorate it and move it away from the wooden aesthetic of the attic. But with so much turmoil during Callum's early years, he never got round to doing it and had focused instead on finishing his grow room, which in hindsight was a way he had buried his head in the sand. Then, after the death of Anna, he didn't want to change Callum's room, nor believed that he deserved it. Because clearly, Callum had caused the death of his mother. Bernard did not know if directly or as a result of the boy toying with her already fragile mind with his trickery within the manor. But he was to blame. At the very least, his child was incredibly mentally unwell to the point where he was a danger to others, and by proxy, Bernard was also to blame. It was his fault for not changing the outcome. If he had only addressed the issue earlier, been more stern or proactive, or spoken to Anna when he knew she was struggling with a newborn child, or moved them out of the house, addressed Callum's panics instead of just placing him in front of a bowl of pond water, he could have stopped all of this. Callum was his child, and so, though he may not have all of the details, it was his job to ensure that his son never enacted such tragedy again. Bernard became his son's jailer, locking him into his bedroom with the use of a wooden bar, the first but not the last of his alterations to the house in the wake of Anna's death. He ignored his son for most of the day, providing him with meals and access to the bathroom at routine times, as well as letting Callum out once per day to take a secret route through the house directly to the place of Anna's death, where he would leave Callum for an hour in order to forever remind him of the hurt he had caused. This lasted for years, with no resolution ever in sight. That was Bernard's life now. Initially, during Callum's hours of enclosure in his room, Bernard would hear him forever shifting through a variety of emotional states, from hysteria to rage to silence to tranquil humming. Callum would batter the door, trying to get out, and Bernard would stand in his grow room, tending to his research while holding a syringe of sedative. Surprisingly, he never needed to use it. Callum never succeeded in breaking out or tried to harm Bernard in any way when he unlocked the door. Eventually, he seemed to just submit to this new way of life, calmly taking his daily trip to the basement pool and returning to his room without argument. This was the routine for a long time, until, as Anna had once feared, Bernard started to become aware. And now we're going to move to a place we haven't yet ventured in this manor, and that is below the house, which was all once connected to the entry via a staircase below the one that remains there, until Bernard boarded it up. Now, the only way to access the basement is via a secret passage that Bernard built through the wall of the house from his library, So this outer door below the staircase outside accesses only a storage room used for gardening supplies, which we're going to build next. Because this room became Bernard's refuge, he needed a place to be away from the house, so as part of his reconstruction work, he also boarded up the door linking the storage room to the rest of the basement, keeping its access only to the outside. He would do his rounds of the grounds, collecting his samples, and then he would take them into the storage room. He wanted to be away from Callum and the house, but above that, he was beginning to find that there was not much point in taking his samples back into the house. For reasons that he couldn't fathom, biodiversity in the grounds was declining. Not just that, but plants were becoming stunted in their growth. As a result, the life that had once occupied the pond was fading. Bernard wasn't much of a chemist, but he did know how to perform some basic tests and identification of minerals. So he gathered samples of the soils, the plants, the pond water, and began to investigate what exactly was changing in the chemistry of the ecosystem outside. Within the soils, spreading through the grounds via some form of natural shift below the surface, were deposits of metals. Not common ones, but ones that made no sense for them to be present in such quantities, enough to replace so much of the soil that the nutrients was falling. Gold was one of them, but others were even more surprising. Tantalum, ruthenium, both, to Bernard's knowledge, rare metals typically used in the production of electronics. He recalled something Anna had once said to him. "It's this house, the grounds even." In that moment, something clicked in Bernard's mind. As he held a plucked stem of a flower within his fingers, he stared out of the storage room door and wondered, what was he a biologist for? Had he written any papers? Had he published anything? Did he have any ties to a single university? Had he ever given a lecture? Had he ever reported any kind of findings to a single person? He couldn't remember doing any of that. His stomach churned as he asked himself a further question. Had he ever even left the grounds of the manor? His answer was fast and simple. No, he hadn't. As he turned away from the door, Bernard honed in on the bags of soil and noted that they had moved. And from that moment of chilling realization, Bernard too began to notice that the house was changing. And now beside this storage room, but with no access to it, we are going to go to the wine cellar, which was once connected to the storage room before Bernard closed it off from the rest of the house. And now it's only accessible by the hidden corridor within the walls that links the secret bookcase in the library to the basement. Now, Bernard wasn't much of a drinker, but questioning his whole existence and witnessing the change that Anna and Callum had claimed for so many years, he didn't know what else to do. The more he tried to ignore it, the more he noticed. Chairs would pivot as he turned his back, doors would open or close, lights would turn on or off, books suddenly vanished, appearing on surfaces elsewhere. He witnessed this in the wine cellar itself. A book appeared, one he hadn't seen for years, and as Bernard downed a glass of wine, he couldn't help but remember how Anna believed the house to have some kind of sentience, because the book was a notebook. The one Callum had once used to keep notes for the little bowls of pond water all of those years ago. The one that Bernard had never looked inside because he had been dismissive of a child's ability to log any meaningful information. It was as though the house wanted Bernard to have it now. The pages were filled with scribbles and infantile sketches, as he had presumed. Poorly attempted pencil recreations of creatures Callum had seen through the magnifying glass. But as Bernard followed the pages and the days they represented, the sketches abruptly changed. Callum had suddenly switched his focus. Instead of drawing pictures of a pond and the life inside it, he drew a house. Then, a house in a pond. Then, a pond in a bowl. Then, a house in a bowl, surrounded by a collection of emoting faces. Happy, sad, angry, sleeping. Callum had progressed, drawing pictures of the house with a singular face inside it, and beside that, what were presumably stick figures of himself and Anna and Bernard. He appeared to indicate emotions. When the house was happy, Callum and Anna were happy. If it was sad, they were sad. And when it was angry, they looked scared. Bernard's face, however, was blank in every picture, except for when Callum had indicated the house was asleep, at which point the sketches of himself and Anna were happy, but Bernard was also fast asleep. As Bernard closed that notebook, he looked through the glass of the door that revealed the old abandoned pool beyond, but he found that he couldn't move. He stood paralyzed as the light began to change. And now we are going to move to the pool, which is the room in which we are going to discover Anna's fate. And this was once a very grand Victorian-style pool below the house, with a shower stall which Bernard reconstructed to be the new entrance into the secret hallway between his library and the cellar. After the event that led to Anna's death, he drained the room and left it to mould within its own humidity and lack of ventilation, installing a set of bars to lock Callum within his memory of Anna for an hour each day. But within Callum's memory, you can be sure that the walls are clean and the water is crisp, and there's a gentle sound of water lapping against the edge echoing from the arches around the pool as Anna's swimming leisurely throughout the water. Callum had opted not to go in on this day, despite her encouragement. He was preoccupied, fearing that his father was going to soon intervene and ensure that he and his mother would struggle to spend much time together from now on. He did, after all, believe that everything happening in the house was Callum's fault. Callum recalled the day that everything had changed. The day he had realised, woken up, and began to see. That simple thought as he had gazed into the unknowing, tiny ecosystem within a bowl of pond water. What if, just like those tiny and oblivious creatures that had no idea he was there modifying their environment, what if Callum, his parents, the house, the grounds, were also in a bowl and they just didn't realise, because they were also tiny and just as oblivious? It had taken such a simple question for the veil to completely lift, for him to begin to see the change, to find himself no longer asleep but suddenly paralysed and conscious as the house enacted its modifications, to watch his father have no clue every time he became still for minutes, sometimes hours, then finally come back around as the house settled and continue whatever sentence he had been partway through saying as though nothing had happened. That was why it was so important to Callum that he had Anna. But soon she would be taken away from him, he knew that. And so, as she swam in the pool, he asked her a simple question. He asked if he was able to do something to help her to escape. Would she want him to? She of course replied only if he came with her, but Callum knew that wasn't an option. So, having become fluent in the language of the house, how it worked and how it controlled them, he reached out and with shocking ease, as though they weren't even screwed down, he began to move the pool ladders. He twisted them to face the wrong direction, and Anna watched, treading water and beaming with impressed surprise as though Callum was performing some kind of magic trick. Callum sat back down and waited. He didn't respond as Anna asked how he had moved the ladders. She swam around a little more, confused, before heading to the side of the pool to climb out. But upon reaching the edge, she halted. She couldn't climb out. Callum already knew she wouldn't be able to. He hadn't blocked her in any way or placed anything around the pool, but quite simply, the pool didn't have an edge. It wasn't a pool. It was a hole filled with water. And just as the bizarre rules within their confining bowl didn't allow her to use the twisted ladders to pull herself out, it would not allow her to use the perfectly simple edge. Although Anna was aware of the house's true nature, she had never truly awoken in the same way as Callum. There was still much that she didn't realise or question, so she was confused. And that was why he needed her to be free. Callum had already learned all of the ways the house confined him, how it wouldn't let him take 2 steps at a time, or climb on the railing above the hall, or open many of the cabinets, or sit on the floor. The list was endless. Now, the house would not allow Anna to leave the pool, even as she began to panic, become exhausted, even wave up at the ceiling as though she knew the house was somehow watching her from above, with every ability to assist her but no interest in doing so. And that is how Anna drowned, and how Callum freed her from the house. Bernard, with his endless regime over the coming years of parking Callum on a stool beside the pool to remember his involvement in the loss of his mother, likely suspected that Callum felt some form of remorse. He was, of course, still entranced by the manor's illusion of time. Callum, however, realised that so much could happen so quickly, and didn't mind the routine. He knew that he would be back with Anna soon enough. He was comforted by another realization he had had not long after his initial questioning around that bowl of pond water. That was, he and his father had never kept them. There were no rows of pond water sitting and stagnating unattended in Bernard's grow room. At the end of each day, after observing, modifying, studying, they had always taken those bowls back outside, returning their contents into the greater flow of the pond, releasing the unknowing invertebrates back into the greater system. Callum sensed that the house would soon be finished with his family in the same way. It had, of course, almost finished altering the pool around him as he sat observing upon his stool, and as Bernard stood frozen in the wine cellar behind him. Whatever existed beyond the bowl didn't have much left to observe. And so, you may have realised by now what has been going on inside this manor. But if you haven't, essentially this is a story of a family of Sims who, through some unlikely train of thought, have individually become self-aware that nothing within their reality is genuine. And the first thing we're going to do now is break through this wall to leave the pool, because at the end of this story, we are somewhat going to reveal ourselves to Bernard and Callum and become part of this story too. Even though really we always have been. Because we've been constructing this house around them, just as we construct this dig site now. We've been pausing them in place, constricting them to rooms, forcing them through the house, and moving objects before their eyes. And we expect our Sims to simply stop doing and stop being as we do all of these things. But Bernard, Anna, and Callum have broken free of those restrictions. And because now I think it's only fair, we are going to help them. Because Bernard, discovering such bizarre rare metals within the grounds of the house, wants to dig. So we're going to excavate this final room for them and show them the truth of this little bowl in which we've encased them and these grounds and this manor. And at the base of this dig, we are going to reveal what has been creating their reality and what contains such bizarre metals that have been seeping into the soils below the manor. And that is going to be a graphics card. Now, it's not a good one, by the way. In fact, it's one that's so old that perhaps it might be the reason why these Sims glitched and became self-aware in the first place. But now, the story really becomes something that is in your hands. Bernard and Callum can leave through this graphics card that we're going to construct down here. Or they can decide to stay. They can even bring back Anna. Because I'm going to upload this tray file, including the CC, as well as this family, to the Sims file share for you to choose to add to your game if you wish to. You could leave them to re-enter the pond, the flow of lost information, and not download that file. Or you could download it and you could demolish all of the tragedy and pretend it never happened. You could even keep it all, but try to nurture this family and give them a fulfilling life, having them accept their reality but make the most out of it. It's entirely up to you how you want to end this story, and I'm going to leave it here to simply hope that this ending will land and not just cause a bunch of disgruntled faces, because I don't know at this point which one it's going to be, and mildly fear I may have been a bit extra and tried to be too clever, but this is my mind. Welcome. Hello. I don't think anyone should really be that surprised if you've watched my channel for a while that it got this abstract by the end. But that was our little saga of this mystery manor. You guys asked for a house with a secret. I hope that this was a secret enough for you. There's quite a few secrets in this. Thank you so much for watching. This was really fun. Be kind to yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.